Welcome to Dormiveglia, the threshold every human crosses each night, and almost no one explores. Tonight, we explore it together. He was, by most accounts, a terrible sleeper. Thomas Edison worked in bursts, 18-hour stretches of focused, driven activity, followed by collapse. He was not romantic about sleep. He thought it was inefficient. He publicly dismissed the idea that the body needed 8 hours of rest as a kind of weakness, a view he expressed often enough that it became part of his public image, the genius who transcended the need for rest. And yet, Edison slept. He slept every day, on a cot he kept in his laboratory, for exactly this purpose. He napped between experiments, between demonstrations, between bursts of thinking. He was not sleeping despite his convictions about sleep. He was doing something more deliberate than that. What Edison understood, whether he could have articulated it scientifically or not, was that the edge of sleep was a peculiar and productive place. He had a method. He would sit in a chair with a steel ball bearing held loosely in each hand, his arms resting over the sides. Then he would begin to drift. The moment he fell fully asleep, his hands would relax. The ball bearings would drop, strike the floor, and the sound would wake him. He would then reach for his notebook and write down whatever had been passing through his mind in those last moments before the drop. He was not resting in the conventional sense. He was mining the threshold. The state he was after, the brief, strange interval between waking and sleep, had already fascinated artists and thinkers long before Edison. Many of the most creative figures in the history of human thought described this same territory, a place where the mind loosens its grip on logic, where the ordinary categories of thinking dissolve just enough to let something new through. Other painters, composers, and writers across the centuries used similar methods. They were all fishing for the same thing, that brief window when the controlling, editing, organizing mind steps aside, and whatever lies beyond the veil becomes briefly visible. What they were all reaching for is a real phenomenon. The science has a name for it now, and what it reveals about that particular moment in your own evening, the few minutes before you fully slip away, is more interesting than most people ever realize. As your brain begins to leave wakefulness, it passes through a brief and extraordinary transitional state. The constant, busy hum of your thinking mind begins to go quiet. The way a city's noise fades as you drive away from its center. The logical editor loosens its hold. In this state, thoughts begin to move differently. Words surface from places you did not know your memory had stored. The mind generates material in a way it cannot quite replicate when you are fully alert. This is the creative edge of sleep. And it is real enough that researchers who studied it found something striking. People who spent even a short time in this state before being brought back to awareness performed measurably better on certain kinds of problems that require seeing connections between things that do not obviously belong together. The mechanism is not completely understood, but what is clear is this: when the logical, organizing functions of the waking mind relax, the deeper associative networks become more audible. Memories that are not usually connected begin to cross-reference, Patterns that were invisible suddenly have space to emerge. The ordinary gatekeeping of the conscious mind steps back, and something behind it speaks. This is also why the last thing you think about before falling asleep sometimes shapes the texture of your dreams, or why the first thought of the morning occasionally contains a solution to something you were stuck on the night before. The mind in this threshold state is not passive. It is processing, actively, just not in the way you are used to. But here is the part that Edison and others were deliberately exploiting, and that most people simply sleep through, unaware it was ever available. The threshold state is brief, measured in minutes. If you allow yourself to pass through it without interruption, the body crosses into deeper sleep within 5 to 15 minutes, and the state is gone. But if something returns your awareness to the room just before full sleep takes hold, you carry something back. A fragment, a connection, an image that does not quite make sense yet, but holds something worth examining. What you bring back from that edge is material your waking mind could not have generated on its own. It is the product of a mind that was, briefly, usefully unguarded. You have been there every night of your life. You simply were not waiting to catch it. Here is something you can try this week. No ball bearings required. You need a chair you cannot fully slouch in, a quiet 10 to 20 minutes, and the willingness to let your mind drift without following it into sleep. Sit in the chair. Make sure the environment around you is safe. Let your hands rest in your lap or on the armrests, open and relaxed. Close your eyes. Do not try to sleep. Let your thoughts move where they will, following them without grabbing hold of them, the way you might watch clouds pass. The goal is not unconsciousness, but the edge. You will feel it when you arrive. The thoughts begin to change quality, becoming stranger, less linear, less like your ordinary thinking, and more like something arriving from elsewhere. Images may appear unbidden. Sounds may shift. Sentences may form that you did not compose. And then, often, a sudden pull, a physical sensation that returns you to the room. That pull is a signal that you reached the threshold. When it comes, or in the moments just before or after, bring your attention gently back and notice what was present. A word, an image, the emotional texture of a thought you were almost inside. Write it down immediately, without evaluating it. Do not ask whether it makes sense. Just record it and return to your day. If you want to use this more deliberately, try it in the afternoon. The natural dip that arrives roughly 12 hours after waking is your body's standing invitation to visit this state. A short, gentle alarm gives you permission to return when the time is right. Here is another interesting tool from the same territory, one that sounds paradoxical until you understand why it works. Drink a cup of coffee, then within 5 minutes of finishing it, lie down and close your eyes. Caffeine takes roughly 20 to 25 minutes to cross from the gut into the bloodstream, where it can reach the brain. In those 25 minutes, if you allow your body to rest, even without fully sleeping, something useful happens. The background fatigue of the afternoon reduces slightly. The threshold state may visit you briefly, and then, just as you return to waking, the caffeine arrives. The combination produces an alertness that most people find cleaner and more sustained than either the nap or the coffee alone. The brief rest reduces the fatigue the caffeine would otherwise need to override. The caffeine prevents the post-nap grogginess that longer sleep can produce. Each one fixes the weakness of the other. The timing is precise. The rest window must stay short, 20 to 25 minutes at most. If you sleep longer, you will enter deeper stages of sleep, and rising from those produces a heavy, foggy feeling that the caffeine cannot fully overcome. The coffee nap is about skimming the surface, taking what the threshold offers and surfacing alert rather than dragged under. Edison understood something most productivity culture is still catching up to. The edge of sleep is not wasted time. It is a different kind of thinking. It simply requires a little more intention to use. Thank you for watching. If you found stillness here, there is more waiting. Subscribe, and we will meet again at the threshold.